Hello, you're watching news from Kazakhstan. It is Thursday, October 18th. I am Nurbek Savitahunov. Zhanaozen paid his final respects to Alexander Bazhenka on Wednesday, October 17th. He was buried in accordance with Muslim traditions at the Tenge cemetery on the outskirts of the oil town.
The name Salahuddin is inscribed on the temporary gravestone. This is how people called Alexander in the mosque, since the orphan was a follower of Islam. His friends and relatives gathered on Wednesday for the wake, together with his colleagues from the Department of Oil and Gas, but no officials were present. The 23-year-old Zhanaozen resident Alexander Bazhenka was brutally beaten by two young men and later died as a result of received injuries in the hospital. Police says the suspects have been apprehended and already confessed to the crime. The late Alexander Bazhenka became known after speaking of tortures in the prison during the Zhanaozen riots trial.
The cities of Kazakhstan honored the memory of Alexander Bazhenka. Despite bad weather, around a dozen activists gathered to light candles in Almaty. Civil activist Bulat Yelemesov read out a poem dedicated to the late Bazhenka.
We went at each other until we drew blood, raging in jealousy, conflicts and laziness. We sold our people, our heroes, our faith. Scraps on the platter mistook as an honor. Our fat cheeks we would drop on our beds, grasping at ancestors and boasting of breed. People on earth take shelter as hangers-on, sitting on a shaky boat without oars, embarking on a vast open journey. The terrible wind will blow us away, erasing the head led astray. Activists noted that they are aware of the official version of Bazhenka's death. He allegedly had been beaten to death by bullies. However, activists also think that the possible reason for his murder might have been his testimony on Aktal case over 37 oil workers. To recap, Bazhenka initially testified anonymously as a witness from the prosecution, but later said that he was made to testify against the defendants under tortures. The events like the one organized yesterday in Almaty were also held in Uralsk, Karaganda, and also in Washington, Warsaw, and Geneva. Activists made a statement on the internet saying that they would demand a transparent and a fair investigation of the crime, and the case itself will be under public control. We all hope that this is not related to the trial proceedings and that his murder has nothing to do with it. However, we have our doubts and suspect that it was the Zhanaozen trial over the 37 oil workers that is related to his murder. It's very difficult to speak the truth of Zhanaozen now.
This is Nursultan Nazarbayev, the Kazakh dictator and tyrant, reads the headline of an advertisement poster that came out in the Washington Examiner. The publication, along with an attached letter written by Kazakhstan's public activist, was paid for by Human Rights Watch. The letter is addressed to leaders of civil society in the United States and other countries. In it, activists ask the United States to consider compiling a Zhanaozen list, similar to the Magnitsky list, and limit entry to a number of the country's officials, as well as possible financial transactions. Activists included high-ranking officials, judges, investigators, and police officers in the so-called Zhanaozen list.
At the top of the list are the President Nursultan Nazarbayev, his former Chief of Staff Aslan Musin, Nazarbayev's son-in-law Timur Kulibayev, Interior Minister Kalmuhammed Kasymov, Attorney General Askat Daulbayev, National Security Committee Chairman Nurtay Bakayev, Chief Justice Bektas Beknazarov, former Mayor of Zhanaozen Orak Sarbapeyev, ex-Governor of Mangistau Region Krymbek Kushurbayev, as well as judges and investigators working on the cases of Zhanaozen riots and social hatred incited by politicians. Police officers who gave false testimonies during the trial of 37 oil workers also made it to the list.
Defense attorneys familiarized themselves with the sentence handed down to Vladimir Kozlov, Serik Sapargali, and Akshanat Aminov. Judge Murzabekov's verdict mentions media such as newspapers Vzglyad, Golos Respubliki, K+ television channel, Stan.tv, and Respublika websites that call for the overthrow of constitutional regimes.
Political analysis of these objects show that the contents of the aforementioned materials has signs of political extremism, while they are aimed at undermining and destroying socio-political foundations of Kazakhstan's constitutional regime, and thus caused Zhanaozen riots on December 16, 2011. There are many similar accusations against independent media in the sentence, yet none of them is backed up with references to specific publications and words. Lawyers explain that right now the authorities cannot shut down outlets based on the findings of the judge. However, after the court's decision on Kozlov will come into force, journalists' involvement in inciting social hatred will be viewed as a fact. Therefore, Sergei Utkin advises reporters to appeal the ruling until it's too late. We need to appeal this ruling and say that we are not part of this trial, therefore no decision should be taken regarding us. In other words, none of the allegations of extremism, radicalization, etc. were ever proven. Tamara Kaliyeva, the president of International Foundation for Protection of Freedom of Speech, Adil Sos, explains that the wording used in the ruling, such as destructive criticism, destructive media and serving the interest of organized crime groups, have no legal basis and rather seem like political hysteria. These are not legal terms, but wording used during Stalinist political prosecution. Calling these people public enemies and urging to line them up against the wall is a political hysteria. I don't believe that experts volunteered to do it officially.
Advisor to the Kazakh president and former information minister Yermohamed Yurtizbayev believes the names mentioned in the Kozlov verdict regarding mass media does not mean that the court decided to shut down the publications, so journalists have nothing to worry about for now.
I expressed my point of view about your newspapers. I don't like them, but they still should be published. In general, I strongly object to shutting down newspapers. This should happen only per court decisions. But as far as I know, the trial over Kozlov didn't produce any rulings regarding the fate of newspapers. So rejoice and celebrate this moment, as we do indeed have humane courts.
Meanwhile, the fate of the new head of the Accounts Committee, Aslan Musin, is still unknown. Official sources claim he's on leave and is undergoing treatment in Germany. However, rumors of his flight abroad abound on the internet. Will the former chief of staff return to his homeland or join the ranks of the immigrant opposition? Find out next.
Aslan Musin has been in a new position of head of accounts chamber for about a month now. During this month, the former head of presidential administration was lost for the country. Here is the little information we managed to obtain from his subordinates. Aslan Musin is on vacation. We don't have the exact information on his whereabouts. He's on an official vacation. It has been agreed with the presidential administration. Aslan Musin's fate has brought about various rumors and versions. Some say he's undergoing a treatment in Germany. According to different versions, Musin followed Raskaliyev brothers and went abroad and is not planning to return. Musin took his wife out of the country, and according to our information, she currently lives in the United States. His daughter lives in Switzerland, and his children are facing the risk of several criminal cases being brought against them. He's a reasonable man, and he definitely had a backup plan to escape Nazarbayev's persecution. They need to understand that sooner or later Nazarbayev is going to do away with them. He's now cleaning everything up in order to conceal the real motives of the genocide. Bulat Abilov, an opposition politician, doesn't take Rahat Aliyev's words on trust.
Ситуация с Асланом Мусиным, я думаю, здесь президент предусмотрел какие-то противовесы, да?
President has his own ways to control Aslan Musin. His family is here and so are his children. He's like a hostage. Even if he wants to leave the country, he can't. As far as I know, he is now undergoing treatment in Germany, but he will return and get back to work. We will see and hear Aslan Musin again.
Думаю, мы еще увидим и услышим Аслана Мусина.
Petr Svoik believes that the temporary leave of the nation's leader close subordinate abroad is a kind of a way to hold negotiations on the future life and career of Musin in Kazakhstan.
Отъезд за границу облегчает переговоры, которые сейчас идут.
It's easier now to negotiate when he left the country. Negotiations are going on and they will continue. The matter is that 10 years ago, the president could easily control those around him, administration and city administration. Now everything has been crystallized around him. Proto-parties have now formed in his close circle. Negotiations are also a process for the regime collapse. It's impossible to reach an agreement.
Договориться невозможно.
Mikhail Sizov, Alga party member, has drawn several political parallels when speaking of the present and the future of Aslan Musin.
Я вижу прямую связь между зачисткой, так скажем, среди руководства.
I see direct link between the elimination of some top Atrao regional officials and Aslan Musin's absence from the country. The escapes and arrests, in other words, a cleanup of the bureaucratic landscape, led to Musin's dismissal from his post. All these events are interrelated. I believe that the trial of history concerning tragic events in Zhanaozen is not far off. The more dynamic the events will develop, the faster the truth will be disclosed. We're especially interested in such an outcome, as it automatically exonerates our leader Vladimir Kozlov. Only Aslan Musin himself can answer the question where the head of audit committee is and whether he will return to the high-ranking public service. Some experts and just aware people forecast he will repeat the fate of Mukhtar Jakishev, who also left for Germany to receive treatment. Everybody knows what happened to him then.
The official himself is incommunicado, while the website ruh.kz features new information with Musin's son Asylbek. A video appeared this week where Musin Jr. talks about not politics but faith.
Этика, мораль, нравственность. Что лежит в основе этих понятий?
In Kazakhstan, Asylbek Musin is known as the leader of religious movement Izgi Amal. Experts consider the movement controversial and reckon it as the so-called Quranites. The son of the audit committee's head posts his thoughts online with surprising regularity. However, it has been recently reported that Musin Jr. left Kazakhstan. It should be noted that some experts see political subtext in his religious activity. Those videos have really put me on alert, especially knowing the position his father holds. The one thing that surprised me most is when the information spread that he was lecturing for the leading officials of National Security Committee, for those who were particularly involved in the issues of religious extremism. At the same time, I can see his desire to be part of the major political process in the country. I think a lot of factors play into this, and one of them is that he is the son of a well-known governmental official.
Another scandal on the Kazakh border, this time in Pavlodar region. Urlutobe border guards attacked the financial police in an attempt to resist arrest. One of the guards is suspected of accepting bribes. As a result of the scuffle, 10 financial police officers were injured and one instigator was taken into custody. More details next.
Situation at the Kazakh-Russian border happened last Monday. Officers of Pavlodar Regional Department of Economic Crimes and Anti-Corruption started an operation on interception of servicemen of the border post Urlutube, who was exposed in systematic receipt of bribes from entrepreneurs taking consumer goods to Russia. Colleagues of the suspect tried their best to hinder the unwanted visitors. Even the acting chief of the border took part in this. Don't allow any strangers in here. Step back. I'm the temporary acting chief of the border post. Introduce yourself in front of the camera. Film the illegal actions immediately. Nobody is allowed inside. Take off your hands. I'm the temporary acting chief of the border post. While some representatives of the financial police were involved on procedural issues, others tried to calm down the servicemen. But the border guards realized that they're in a majority. There were around 30 men. They got the batons and attacked the policemen. What is your last name? How do I know? Family name. Hey, don't break the camera. Hands off. Financial police informed that the attacked investigators tried to leave the border post but were prevented by the armed border guards, who took away the evidence and the protocols from them. The material evidence was destroyed, audio and video equipment was damaged and some were taken away. They also took some protocols where the crimes committed by these servicemen from Urlutube post were registered. Today, the attack on the financial police is being investigated by the military prosecutor's office. One only person has been detained so far in relation to the event at the border. Military Investigation Department of the Pavlodar region has started the criminal investigation on the fact of resistance to the officials. One person has been detained. He is the serviceman of the border post. No further comments. The Army Department number 2033, where the border post Urlutube belongs, didn't want to disclose any details of the event. It is not allowed to film here. It's a governmental institution. We're not on the street. No, you can't film here. Take your cameras away. It is too early to say what this clash of two law enforcement bodies will end up with. The incident is under investigation now, but it is the third incident of this kind from the beginning of the year.
A 3-year budget plan was ratified on Wednesday by the lower house of parliament. As usual, deputies argued for a while, but eventually unanimously approved the country's main financial document. This time it features cuts in social spending. Here are our correspondents from Astana with the numbers.
On Wednesday, the parliament unanimously approved the budget for 2013-2015. Aside from 107 members of lower house, the entire cabinet of ministers, along with the prime minister himself, gathered to split the large amount. The minister of economic development, Yerbolat Dasaev, shared the price forecasts for oil and metals in the coming years, the growth of GDP, basically everything that affected the amount of budget. In the meantime, the MPs have already prepared tricky questions. Thus, the Riga Nazarbayeva surprised herself while surprising the others. It turns out that the country spends more on prisoners than on children. The Ministry of Finance reduced the budget for the program Balapan. It takes $1,000 to $1,200 per year to educate the school child, $1,200 per year to pay for the kindergarten, while the annual cost of confinement for each convict is $4,660. As a result, major part of the funds was allocated for their education and healthcare. The agriculture received a decent share of over $3.9 billion. An Affordable Housing 2020 program received roughly $3.3 billion, whereas the real estate investors only received the bad news. We should look specifically on interest holders. Do you understand? I know the MPs addressed this issue, but we receive requests of such kind from all over the country. So far, this is not provided in the national budget. By the end of the session, the MPs started getting out of hand. They were suspicious of fraud and deceit everywhere. Thus, Murat Abenov suspected National Bank in collusion with pension funds. Since it's offering to raise the retirement age for women, then the National Bank wants to delay payment. The entire financial system is apparently designed against the common person, summarizes the MP. Take the People's IPO, for instance. Only 10 to 20,000 people will be able to buy it. That's just 0.1%, while 99.9% of the people will not be allowed to purchase the shares according to the National Bank and Samruk-Kazana. Then why do we have to sell the shares? After a long discussion, the budget was finally approved and even increased. In the next year, it will be a little more than $40 billion. It will be $46.6 billion in 2015. Everyone seemed to enjoy it. The Prime Minister even thanked the people gathered. The document has yet to be approved by the Senate and signed by the President.
Around 40 Leave Housing to the People shareholders are attempting to gain access to parliamentarians in Astana in order to ask them to stop banks from pursuing their reactionary policy.
On Wednesday, activists managed to meet with Senator Gani Kasimov, but like other MPs, he just said that nothing could be done unless the laws were adjusted. At the same time, people have long threatened the authorities with mass protests. Unfortunately, reporters were not allowed at the meeting, but it was apparent stakeholders left it disappointed and once again threatened extreme measures if their problems remained unresolved.
Пока не поменяют законодательство, ничего не изменится абсолютно.
Nothing will change unless the legislation changes. I heard recently that people were going to take to the streets. They're not going to hang themselves or set themselves on fire. They will simply fight for their own rights and for the future of their children and families.
Действительно уже как бы сражаться за свое, за своих детей, за свою семью.
A one-day strike held by Eurotech service employees ended in signing a pay rise agreement with company management. Negotiations with management as well as heads of Kazakhstan Corporation and officials finished at around midnight. Previously, around 80 Eurotech service miners refused to go back up to the surface, demanding higher wages.
According to the trade union chair Kanatbek Murtazov, the tension at the plant has been around since May. To avoid the escalation of the situation, Kazakhmys board chair Eduard Agay approved miners' wage increase last May. But instead of receiving more, workers noticed their salaries substantially decreasing, and the trend continued for the last 6 months. In September, miners were paid in the range of $135 to $270 each instead of $1,000 to $1,350 for working 15 hours daily shifts. Frequent strikes in Zhezkazgan region have long become the main tactic to demand changes from employers. Back in 2008, miners of Kazakhstan Corporation held their first underground mass protest with over 900 workers demanding wage increase, refusing to leave the mine. In May of 2012, employees of Aninsky mine also held an underground strike demanding a salary increase of 100%. It was agreed that the salaries will be increased starting October 1st, and Podlik will be meeting with Agay regarding this matter. We also have an appointment scheduled with Agay for the next week. The issue regarding the recalculation of payments will be also addressed. I asked them as whether the miners of Eurotech service are still valuable to Kazakhmys Corporation, and I was told yes, which means Kazakhmys won't stay aside.
Public transportation owners in Semey want to raise fares. They appealed to the local Public Utilities Committee with the initiative and are awaiting a response. Local residents are now apprehensive about the prospects of using their services.
I believe it is wrong to raise transportation fees because wages are lower here than in other parts of the country. People with small salaries spend about 10 to 30% of their income for transportation. It is not right to raise public transportation fees. First of all, the raise of transportation fees will affect pensioners and especially university students. They often have to switch lines during commute, and it will be quite hard for young people since they are unemployed. The raised fees will affect our lives. Even 5 cents make a big difference for us. Transportation companies present quite an objective reasons for raising their fees. According to the director of public transportation company Asia Combi, Vladimir Filichkin, the fees have to go up due to increasing fuel prices and companies' logistics costs. In the meantime, the Public Service Agency says the final decision will be made by the local authorities after the official sit-down to discuss the matter with transportation companies' representatives.
See the world through the eyes of autistic children. An exhibition featuring drawings by little Kazakhstanis suffering from one of the world's most mysterious diseases was held on Wednesday in Almaty. Only in the last few years, the number of cases grew tenfold. The goal of the event is to convey the child's inner world and tell the public that they are in need of help. Our reporters visited the exhibition.
One of the Almaty coffee shops is featuring an exhibit of unusual paintings, but it isn't likely that patrons can even guess that the works are done by autistic kids with photographic memory. This one was created by Aruzhan, who drew what she saw. Aruzhan is a lively and sociable girl now, but a couple of years ago she only responded when her name was called, kept playing alone or staring into distance without blinking or looking at others' eyes. Her mother noticed the strange behavior and brought the kid to doctors, who diagnosed the girl with autism, which can be treated in Kazakhstan. I searched for various methods of treatment here in Almaty, then in Moscow, and we have started exercising using the techniques we found. We went to Moscow a few more times, and now we have been doing this for 3 years. We have the result, and the diagnosis of autism has been dropped. Aruzhan and other kids should also develop spiritually, say their parents, who founded the Union of Families with Autistic Children. Their center applies individual approach and customized methods for every single child. Through the painting, kids express what they hide deep in their minds, and the brighter the painting, the better is the result. We painted swimming dolphins together after we saw them in the circus, and we also have the sea at bottom of the painting, the deep blue sea. Autism is one of the most mysterious developmental disorders. In the last 20 years, the number of registered autism cases continues to grow. Many learned about the disorder for the first time from the movie Rain Man, and now Almaty residents can do the same with this unusual exhibition.
A Kazakh response to Russia's ethno-pop ensemble Buranovsky Babushki. Kazalorda region now boasts its own band made up of grannies named Bisaryksky Apashki. These mothers of large families surprised village residents with their renewed set list. If the grannies sang in Kazakh and Russian languages before, they now have an English language song to add to the repertoire.
Back to school at the age of 70, for Khadisha Baltasheva, learning English is a tough task in her age. However, she admits that she overcame her first language barrier about 5 years ago, and now she fluently speaks Russian. Her goal is to learn as many languages as possible.
Hello, Kazakhstan. My name is Khadisha.
Who could have imagined that I would sing in English in my 70s? Once we saw on TV how old ladies from Buran sang in English, so we thought, why can't we do the same too? Now we're learning English and teaching our grandkids. In 5 years, the group created its own songs list consisting of 40 songs, which it sings in Kazakh, Uyghur and Russian. This bold experiment from the linguistic perspective to learn English in this remote area is driven by a team of effort. Of course, it was tough since it seemed impossible to overcome the language barrier in such an old age and acquire the right diction. But we worked on it days and nights, not only in schools, but we also gathered in someone's house. Ladies appeared to be quite good students, and the results make us happy. We already have 4 songs that we sing in English. Everything started from a similar to this village gathering. Grandmas used to gather at each other's houses to help with waving handmade traditional floor cloths meant for the dowry. They sang as they worked together. Don't think that country grandmas only sing and dance. One of us spins on a spindle, other lady waves carpets, and we even have a designer, for example, Baktay Sirikbayeva, created all our costumes for stage. For now, the senior ladies have only the certificates of participation in regional contests. These grandmas are sure that big stages and new victories lie ahead of them, but the most important things for them are positivity, optimism and drive. After all, their lives are accompanied with songs.
Finally, a photo album of Alash Autonomy's government named Alash Orda was presented in Almaty by historian Bolat Mursalim. In his words, the state archive and Alash Orda leaders' families served as sources of material for the compilation. The album's release was timed to coincide with the autonomy's 95th anniversary.
The book was sponsored by the ruling party Nuratan and Altın Kıran Foundation. Only 1,000 copies were released. As reported by the authors, the book is not going to hit store shelves, so anyone interested in history of Alashorda can find it in libraries. Members of Alashorda are remembered as first fighters for independence in Kazakh history. Teachers, scientists, writers, geographers and engineers have established this party in the early 20th century at the Kyrgyz National White Convention and proclaimed their own autonomy. A few years later, Alashorda was eliminated by the Military Revolutionary Committee, while its leadership executed by the authorities.
И вот эти фотографии очень показывают вот эту сложную судьбу их, да, какие они были в детстве.
These photos reveal their hard fate at different periods of their lives, starting from childhood. They all look in good shape, bright and confident. Some of the pictures are from 1930s, just a few days prior to their execution. Yet by looking through them, you see the eyes of these people, their faces, and understand that all their hardships with prisons, interrogations, tortures and everything else didn't break them.
Пройдя через все, испытания, тюрьмы, допросы, пытки и так далее, но характер остался.
This is all we have time for now. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow.